Excited to have here with us today Licenciada Alma Rosa Moreno, who is currently a senior advisor to the Director General of Pemex. Alma, it's so great to have you here. Thanks for joining us tonight at the Institute to give a tequila talk. Nice to speak.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm delighted to be here with you.
Alma, you've had a long career working at the Ministry of Finance and other financial institutions in Mexico. In your work with the Director General, specifically in terms of tax and finance issues, what is it that you think, in your opinion, and what are you working with the Director General on in terms of the biggest financial challenge at Pemex, and how are you advising him to deal with that challenge?
Well, let me tell you, Pemex is facing many challenges, but coming from the Minister of Finance, I know that the most important challenge of Pemex is to convince the Minister of Finance and the Mexicans that it needs to pay less taxes than the ones they are paying right now in order to have the money to invest for the big job of keeping the production of oil at the level that it is needed for the development of the country. Pemex is the largest taxpayer in Mexico. Of each peso, Pemex pays 35 cents. So you can imagine the size of the amount of money that is taken every year from Pemex. And it leaves Pemex sometimes even with less than the net income it received that year. So right now, Pemex has the need to reduce the taxes it pays in order to invest and be able to produce oil, and of course create all the support for the Mexican economy that has been creating along the years.
Obviously, anytime, Alma, we talk about Pemex, the issue of how the company is managed is at the forefront of any discussion. So let me ask you, because I think one of the things we've heard a lot about from the new Director General since he took over is the issue of corporate governance. What is it exactly that the new Director General and you as a role as senior advisor are doing to bring a more effective management and corporate governance practices to Pemex?
The corporate governance reform that came into Pemex in the energy reform in 2008 implies the need of Pemex to restructure the way it operates in order to increase efficiency. This corporate governance means that special transparency has to come in how Pemex does all the job it does in the different areas, what's the cost of each of the sectors where it produces, and at the end to be transparent enough in order to be able to change the way things are done in Mexico. Mexicans are very reluctant to believe that Pemex is efficient enough to be able to give them more money. This is the first step in this big transformation that has to be done regarding to taxes. Pemex has to show that it's an efficient corporation, that it needs improvements in many areas because it needs investments to do, and of course transparency is the way to do a better job within Pemex and to do a better job regarding the adequate administration that it needs.
I know that obviously we've talked about your financial background, your work at the Ministry of Finance, so this may be a bit of an unfair question, but please talk a little bit about what is perhaps the biggest issue facing not just Pemex but Mexico, and that is declining oil production. Could you talk a little bit about what you've seen at Pemex in your short time there and how the company is dealing with that huge challenge?
In order to keep production at the level it has, it needs to keep investing not only on exploratory jobs, that of course in due time will increase reserves, but in order to keep production at the level, it needs investment in the development of those reserves already proved. So in order to produce oil, Pemex needs to increase its investment. In the long time, production would be through the investment in exploratory and delimitatory jobs in different fields. Everybody knows that Pemex has this big expectation on large reserves in the Gulf of Mexico. But in order to know where exactly they are, how they are going to be brought into production, etc., large investments have to be done there. And this is the big challenge of finding the resources. Given the constitutional fact that Pemex cannot share production with someone else, it will have to be their own investment, its own investment, the one bringing up those productions. So that is the reality of Pemex. Pemex is perfectly conscious that it needs investment, it needs technology, it needs knowledge, the development of human capital in order to do the job, not only the financial area, but more than anything else on the productive area of oil.
Quick follow-up to that, where do incentive contracts, the new contracts that were part of the reform, where do they fit into that, achieving that goal and overcoming that hurdle?
Well, a part of the energy reform was the assumption that Pemex needed much more flexible contracts in order to bring companies with the expertise and the desire to share the expertise on production in difficult sites like deep sea oil with the Pemex. But in order to bring this specialist into these fields, it needed not the so narrow contracts it use on services. It needs as well some incentivized contracts that along certain negotiation lines, like maybe bringing into the service the last discoveries of certain technologies, maybe to bring incentives for bringing up oil quicker than otherwise it could have been done. So right now Pemex is working on those contracts. Of course, it's a big challenge because there are certain constitutional challenges there that really impede to be as frivolous as otherwise. But large groups of lawyers are working in order to be able to do these incentivized contracts without transferring the limits that the Constitution implies for that.
Alma, finally, I want to ask you about citizens' bonds, which was something that was a bit talked about during the energy reform of 2008 in Mexico, but I don't know if we've heard a whole lot about it. So let me ask you, what is the status and what are the plans, and who are those going to be available to? When are they going to be offered? Talk a little bit about the citizens' bonds and what they may mean for Pemex and for the nation.
Well, citizen bonds is the first step on the idea of make transparent the efficiency of Pemex for bondholders. Of course, the very sophisticated bondholders that go and buy bonds from Pemex whenever a debt issue is on the market, they do have all this information, but they go linked to a certain rate of interest. Bonds, citizen bonds are supposed to be participating on profits from Pemex. Citizen bonds will be, the idea of the citizen bonds is that Mexicans have a transparent way of knowing how much Pemex profits are each year, and from there they will be receiving maybe a variable price, because the price and the rate will be linked more than anything to the earnings, the net earnings of Pemex. So it's like a first step on the right direction. Right now, unfortunately, the tax share is so large that there are no profits being shared. And this is exactly what has been making difficult to build the so-called citizen bonds, because you have to be very clear what are you going to show the Mexicans in order to buy these bonds and to know that they are going to have a good investment coming from Pemex, a good return.
So those would be available to anyone, any Mexican? Yeah.
Being Mexicans, they will. They are conceived as as not being bought by corporations, because they are going to be purchased by Mexican individuals. It's something that it hasn't been well built. I cannot really give you details on it, because right now the idea of the Mexican CEO of Pemex is, how do we make transparent the efficiency or inefficiency of Pemex, in order to be able to let Mexicans understand the problems and the goals we reach whenever we put them in numbers, in figures, and they give a nice return to these investors.
It's the proverbial cart before the horse, you know the expression?
Yes, of course.
Alma, thank you so much. You're a delight to have here with us. We really appreciate your time, and please give our very best regards to the Director General, and we look forward to seeing you in Mexico City very soon. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. I am really very glad of being here with you, and I am sad to leave tomorrow.